You're seriously applying here? Madison laughed, nearly spitting out her latte as I handed over my resume. Didn't you say you had big dreams? I stood there, trying to ignore the tightening in my chest, surrounded by sleek glass walls and designer chairs that looked more like art than furniture. I could still hear the echo of her mockery bouncing around the marble lobby. 3 years ago, I told her about my dream, to launch my own wellness brand. She'd laugh then too. But today, I wasn't just applying. I was watching her from behind tinted office glass, watching her fumble through papers I had already reviewed and approved.
She didn't know yet.
She didn't know the company she worked for had just been bought out. By me. And this was my first day. My name is Alyssa Carter, and if you had asked me 5 years ago what I wanted most in life, I wouldn't have said fame or riches. I would have said respect. The kind of respect that came from building something with your own hands, from turning late nights and second jobs into a dream that was real enough to touch. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, the youngest of 3 in a family that never took me seriously. My father adored my older brother, and my mom was too caught up in trying to manage everything to ever truly notice me. I wasn't bitter, just used to being the one they all forgot about. But it shaped me in ways I didn't even realize at the time. While my siblings played sports or dated, I spent hours sketching packaging designs, writing names for imaginary products, cutting out photos from magazines to create mock ads for things I dreamed of launching one day. I had a little folder called Vision, a bright blue binder stuffed with notebook paper, napkin sketches, and ideas scribbled at 3 a.m. By senior year in college, I was studying product development and nutrition science. I had one goal: to launch a wellness brand tailored for women of color, something authentic, healing, and real. My idea was rooted in my grandmother's old remedies. She used to rub rosemary oil into our scalps when we were sick, mix turmeric and honey for our colds, and whisper, "Nature's smarter than you, baby." I believed in that. I believed in her. Madison, on the other hand, didn't. We met during our internship at a well-known skincare company in New York City. She was loud, charming, and knew how to work a room. I was more quiet, observant, watching how people operated, always planning 2 steps ahead. We became friends out of convenience at first, coffee runs together, late nights complaining about our supervisors, bonding over being from the South. But friendship has layers. And Madison only liked me as long as I stayed beneath her. She was from Charlotte, North Carolina, came from money, and wasn't shy about reminding me how she always knew people in the industry. She laughed when I told her about my dream. "I mean, natural stuff," she said with a smirk one evening, perched on the office couch with her expensive leather boots kicked up. "That's cute, but no one's really gonna buy, like, your grandma's turmeric goo." I laughed it off at the time, but it stung. Still, I kept going. After graduation, I worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at a juice bar and overnight packaging for a distribution center. I saved every dollar I could. I turned my small apartment kitchen into a lab. I mixed oils, created sample batches, tested ingredients. My walls were covered in sticky notes and printouts. Every cent I had went into trial products, shipping, branding. I was obsessed, yes, but not with success. With proof. Proof that the little girl with the blue binder could be right. In the middle of this grind, I'd call my Grandma May. She'd retired down in Birmingham, Alabama, and we'd talk while I cooked or mixed batches. She'd say things like, "You don't need the whole world to clap. Just clap for yourself first." She laughed, 'cause she ain't seen it yet. One day she'll pay for front row seats. At the time, I thought she meant it metaphorically. Then came the betrayal. One night, during a virtual industry networking event, Madison texted me, "Wait, is this your product line on the screen?" I was shocked. Somehow, someone had shared my early branding deck, an unreleased prototype concept I'd trusted a designer friend with. Moments later, her second message came through. "Girl, did you really name it Rooted? What is this, a gardening blog?" That hurt more than I cared to admit. Not long after, Madison launched her own line, glossy, artificial, clearly targeted toward a natural beauty trend. It had similar fonts, tones, even product themes. She'd done it with investor money and flashy campaigns, pushing it everywhere online. My heart sank when I saw the homepage. Glow from the ground up, the same phrase I had printed on my mock labels months ago. I cried for 3 days straight. But then, I got up. I changed my game plan. Instead of trying to fight her in court, which I couldn't afford, I pivoted. I went hyperlocal. Pop-ups, community wellness events, farmers markets. I sold out almost every weekend. Women connected with me, not through packaging but story. I was real. Madison was curated. Rooted became my mission. I rebranded with help from a friend I met at a natural food expo. She connected me with a non-profit accelerator for Black female founders. They gave me a small grant. Then, during a pitch competition I wasn't even going to attend, I won first place, a $50,000 investment and mentorship deal. Things started to move fast. By the end of the year, I had an LLC, an online storefront, and multiple wholesale offers. A local boutique chain asked to carry my line. I worked 18-hour days, but I was finally living the dream Madison once laughed at. And then the day came when her world started falling apart. I got a call from a mutual acquaintance. Her investors were pulling out. There were rumors of lawsuits over false marketing claims. Her branding was performative, they said. Hollow. No authenticity. Within weeks, her operation downsized. And that's when opportunity knocked. A company I had connected with during my pitch circuit offered me a chance to acquire one of the smaller facilities Madison used to lease for production. She couldn't afford the rent anymore. I had the funds and the silent partner backing. When I signed the paperwork, my hands were trembling. The same building she laughed in, the same hallway where she'd rolled her eyes at my samples, was now under my name. The same conference room she once breezed through like a queen would now hold meetings under my terms. I didn't rush to gloat. I didn't post online. I waited until the day she applied for a contract-based marketing role. Apparently, she didn't know Rooted had moved in. And I didn't tell her. Not until the moment I slid her resume across the table and said, "You're actually quite qualified. But before we go on, do you remember what you said about turmeric goo?" Her eyes met mine and froze. The silence in the room could have sliced glass. Madison stared at me, her manicured hands stiff on the edge of the glass table. Her lips twitched, unsure whether to laugh it off or admit what was happening. I didn't blink. She blinked first. "Alyssa, wait, you own this?" she finally asked, her voice cracking into a higher register, like the reality was catching up too fast. I didn't answer immediately. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment stretch long and slow. The same kind of quiet she used to fill with sarcasm. But now? The room belonged to me. "I do," I replied calmly. "Rooted acquired the facility 2 months ago. Technically, we also acquired your lease. I figured I'd keep it quiet. Let the moment speak for itself." She looked stunned, like her brain couldn't compute it. "No way." "Rooted?" she asked again, leaning in now, voice lower. That's your company? You own Rooted?" I nodded. The turmeric goo must have worked. The burn in her cheeks told me she remembered everything she said. Every dismissive laugh. Every backhanded comment. Every time she told someone at a party that I was just obsessed with herbs. I pulled out a tan envelope from my desk drawer and laid it in front of her. "Here's your offer. Contract-based. 6-month probation. You'd be assisting our junior marketing coordinator. Starting salary's a bit lower than you're used to, but there's room to grow if you're really in it." She didn't reach for the envelope. Her eyes darted to the windows behind me, the same floor-to-ceiling panes she used to strut past in her designer heels. "You planned this," she said finally, her voice hard now. "You waited for me to fall." "No," I said. "You fell on your own. I just happened to be standing at the bottom when you landed." The weight of her own ego was crashing down around her, and I could see it in every twitch of her expression. She hadn't just underestimated me, she had erased me. Now, she was scrambling to rewrite the script, but I wasn't giving her the pen. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Look, I know we had tension, but we were friends once, right? Don't act like I didn't support you." I raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "You didn't support me," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You laughed. You belittled. You stole ideas and made sure I knew I'd never be industry enough. She flinched. But I still offered you a role. I continued. Because despite everything, I believe in second chances. Not just for people, but for myself. And I'm not going to waste energy proving anything to you. You can take the job. Or you can walk away. I stood, walking over to the window. You said no one would buy from me. You were wrong. Thousands of women have because they see themselves in what I create. They don't want polished. They want real. And I give them that. She didn't reply. So I added, this isn't about revenge. This is about ownership. I own my story now. All of it. She sat still for a long time, then reached forward and picked up the envelope. I'll think about it, she muttered. You do that, I replied, turning back toward the sunlight now painting gold across the office floor. Just know this time, you'll be working for the girl you laughed at. As she stood up, I noticed her heels weren't designer anymore. The leather was worn, the shine faded. There was something poetic about that. She walked out slowly, past the desk where she once barked orders, past the walls that now held art created by local women artisans I had partnered with, past the logo etched in glass that read, Rooted Wellness from Within. When the door clicked shut, I exhaled. Not because I was done, but because I was just getting started. The twist hadn't started that day in the office. It began 2 days earlier, when I received an unexpected phone call. The number was familiar, but I hadn't heard from its owner in years. Hey, it's Nina, said the voice. Nina had been one of Madison's former employees. Quiet, brilliant, and constantly overlooked. She and I had worked together briefly during my internship days. She'd reached out to say she'd left Madison's now-defunct company 6 months ago. I didn't like how things were going, she said. Too much smoke, not enough fire. Then she dropped the bomb. I heard Madison's applying to your company. I think she doesn't realize you're behind Rooted. I figured I should give you a heads up. That's when I made the choice. I could have rejected the application on the spot. I could have ghosted her like she once ghosted me after stealing my branding concepts. But I didn't. Instead, I sent an invitation. I wanted to look her in the eyes. Not to embarrass her. Not to humiliate. But to reclaim the space she once made me feel small in. That night, I sat in my home studio, flipping through my old Vision binder. The pages were dog-eared now, covered in oil stains and fading pen marks. But one line stood out, written in bold black Sharpie across the inside cover. One day, they'll need what you carry. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was prophecy. Madison came back 2 days later. This time, she didn't wear a blazer or heels. She wore a gray cardigan and ballet flats, like armor she'd peeled away. Her eyes were a little dimmer. I'll take the job, she said, voice flat. I nodded. All right. Nina will walk you through onboarding. She blinked. Nina? Nina from? Yes. She's our director of marketing now, I replied, standing up and motioning toward the conference room. She'll get you settled. For a second, her jaw tensed. I used to manage her. Now she outranks you. Let that sink in. I walked away without giving her a chance to respond. I had work to do and wounds to stop feeding. But that didn't stop the games from starting. Within a week, Madison began planting small seeds of discontent. Passive-aggressive emails. Comments about how we used to do things. The questions asked loudly in meetings that undermined decisions Nina made. She tried to play the veteran. She tried to control the narrative. But she didn't realize that Rooted wasn't built on hierarchy. It was built on healing. And the team? They saw through her. One day, while I was reviewing partnership contracts in my office, Nina knocked gently. She just told Amanda that the packaging rebrand looks cheap compared to industry standards, Nina said, arms folded. I looked up from my laptop. Amanda, who cried happy tears when she saw her sketches come to life? Nina nodded. That one. I sighed. Bring her in. Later that day, Madison stood in front of my desk again, arms crossed like always. I motioned for her to sit. You're making people uncomfortable, I said calmly. Her mouth curled. I'm just trying to help you grow. Feedback isn't an attack. It is when it's rooted in superiority, I replied. Amanda isn't your assistant. You don't get to talk down to her because you don't understand our design philosophy. She rolled her eyes. It's just constructive criticism. Constructive would be suggesting improvements, not calling someone's work cheap in front of their peers.
She scoffed.
You're all just so soft. No one survives in this business without thick skin. I leaned in, resting my elbows on the desk. And yet, here you are, trying to survive at the mercy of the woman you once mocked. Her face turned crimson. I didn't flinch. You're welcome to stay, I said, keeping my voice calm. But Rooted isn't just a brand. It's a boundary. You either respect the energy here or you leave. For the first time since she walked in, she said nothing. She simply stood up and left. That week, things shifted. She stopped speaking out in meetings. She avoided Amanda. She rarely made eye contact with Nina. But I didn't mistake silence for surrender. I knew Madison well enough to know she was calculating. She'd always been like that, strategic, cunning, subtle. I kept her on a tight leash. Not out of vengeance, but out of protection for the environment I had nurtured. Rooted wasn't built on fear. It was built on trust. And I wasn't about to let one bitter soul poison the garden. Just when I thought the storm had passed, another front rolled in from home. One Sunday evening, while I was making tea, my phone rang. It was my mother. I saw your aunt the other day, she began. Hi, Mom. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. She chuckled.
Sorry.
Hi, baby. I'm proud of you. I smiled. Then she continued, but your aunt mentioned that Madison's been talking to people, telling them you only got where you are because of a loan she gave you back in college. I froze. That loan? That $200 she gave me for books and reminded me about at every family dinner for 2 years? I hung up after a short goodbye and stared into my teacup. The chamomile swirled, come unlike my nerves. She was trying to rewrite the story. Again. The next day, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. To my surprise, Amanda was already there, sketching designs on the lounge couch. I couldn't sleep, she said, without looking up. I sat beside her. She hesitated. I overheard Madison on the phone yesterday. She was talking to someone about your humble beginnings, said she always knew you were resourceful but too emotional to lead. My chest tightened, but only for a second. Then Amanda reached into her tote bag and handed me a folder. I redesigned the entire fall packaging line, she said, because I wanted you to see what I see in this place. Inside were soft neutrals, muted florals, hand-inked typography, all inspired by herbs I used in my original recipes. It felt like a warm hug in paper form. I swallowed emotion. Thank you, I whispered. She smiled. You taught me that kindness doesn't mean weakness. You lead with gentleness. And that's power. That moment meant more than any award. I had built something. Not just a company, but a culture. 2 weeks later, I received an internal email. It was a pitch from Madison, CC'd to the entire executive team. Her tone was arrogant.
Cold.
She was proposing a total rebranding of Rooted's look and feel. Suggested more mainstream influencers. More refined logos. Less handmade aesthetic. She titled the document, Leveling Up Rooted, From Niche to Necessary. What she meant was, erase Alyssa from the brand. I took a deep breath and responded with 2 words.
Meeting.
Tomorrow. 9 a.m. The next morning, the whole leadership team gathered. Nina, Amanda, Lisa from operations, even Thomas from product development, and Madison. I let her speak first. She went on for 15 minutes, talking numbers, trends, charts. Every slide chipped away at the soul of Rooted. Then I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw shade. I simply walked to the whiteboard and wrote 3 words. Healing has value. Then I turned to the team. Rooted didn't grow because we followed trends. It grew because we touched lives. Because women like Amanda put heart into every label. Because Nina made every post feel like a letter to a friend. Because Thomas handpicks every ingredient. I looked at Madison. And because I stayed true to what I believed, even when people laughed. The room was still. Madison didn't say a word. Lisa clapped. Then Nina. Then Amanda. Then everyone else. Madison stayed seated, arms folded tightly. But the shift was done. She wasn't the voice of authority anymore. We were. Madison didn't quit. But she didn't last much longer. 3 weeks later, she quietly resigned. No email blast, no goodbye party. She left a sticky note on her desk that read, "Good luck with your little empire." I found it later and smiled. It wasn't little. It was everything. After Madison's quiet exit, the office felt different. Lighter. Like someone had opened a window and let years of stale air drift away. But even in her absence, I knew the real test wasn't whether she stayed or left, it was what I did next. Because revenge, as satisfying as it can be, is a moment. Healing? That's a process. I remember standing in the middle of my kitchen the following Sunday, stirring lavender into a batch of test balm, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "I know I made mistakes, but you've built something amazing. I hope you know that." Just that. No groveling. No excuses. Just a quiet, vague nod of respect. I stared at it for a while. Then, without much thought, I typed, "Thank you. I hope you find something that brings you peace."
And that was it.
No dramatic closure. No final phone call. Just a soft ending. Because I didn't need an apology to be whole. Over the next month, I shifted my energy. Not toward proving anything. Not toward competing. But toward rooting deeper into who I was. We started a mentorship program inside Rooted, pairing young women from marginalized communities with our staff. Lisa led the initiative, and Amanda volunteered as the first design mentor. One of the girls, a 17-year-old named Tia, came into my office on her first day. She nervously handed me a drawing she'd sketched on a napkin at a coffee shop. It was a flower, half blooming, half still a bud. She looked at me and said, "It's like becoming who you are slowly." I swear, that napkin drawing hit me harder than any designer we'd ever hired. I asked her if we could use it on our next line of gratitude journals.
She cried. So did I.
One afternoon, I received an invitation to a family barbecue from Madison's mother. I hadn't attended any of their events in years. Too many whispered comments. Too many passive jabs about small business girls and arts and crafts jobs. But this time, something in me softened. Maybe it was time. I arrived wearing jeans and a linen blouse, no makeup, hair in a bun. I was not there to impress anyone. I was there to be. The moment I stepped into the backyard, eyes turned. Some curious.
Some awkward.
Some quietly impressed. Madison wasn't there. Her mom gave me a warm hug, pressing her cheek to mine. "I'm proud of you, Alyssa." I just smiled and nodded. Because even if she wasn't there when I needed her, I no longer needed that from her. A week later, Nina burst into my office with a grin on her face. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, waving a letter. It was an offer. A well-known ethical beauty chain wanted to feature Rooted as a flagship community brand across all 28 of their stores. They called our brand Emotionally Honest. I laughed. That's the best compliment I've ever received. But before I signed the contract, I took a walk around the office. I watched Amanda showing Tia how to use watercolors for packaging sketches. I saw Lisa walking a new hire through operations. I heard Thomas on the phone with a supplier, negotiating pricing for our shea butter. I stood still and realized something. We were already winning. With or without retail shelves. With or without exposure. Still, I signed. Because the world deserved to meet Rooted. That winter, we hosted our first community healing circle. We invited women from the neighborhood, mothers, grandmothers, teachers, caretakers. Everyone brought something small, a recipe, a story, a photo. We sat in a circle, drank warm herbal teas, and shared. Some cried. Some laughed. Some just listened. When it was my turn, I didn't bring anything but a story. I told them about the girl who once made handmade soaps in a too small apartment, who walked to farmers' markets in the snow, who was laughed at by someone she looked up to. I told them how she grew roots even in cracked soil, and how she now stood in a circle with other women, not as a brand owner, but as a witness to their strength. By the time I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. We weren't just healing individually. We were healing together. Redemption through leadership. Months passed, and Rooted became something I never imagined. Not bigger, not louder, but wiser. We started hiring women who had been overlooked, women re-entering the workforce after abuse, women rebuilding after divorce, women like me who had once been made to feel small. One afternoon, Amanda walked into my office holding an old sketchbook. "I found this while moving," she said. "It's yours. From when you were still figuring everything out." Inside were crooked sketches, smeared ink, failed prototypes. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. "I was so bad," I whispered, flipping the pages. "No," she said softly. "You were just brave." And in that moment, I understood something. You don't become strong by never breaking. You become strong by rebuilding with love. One morning, while sipping coffee on my porch, I got an email from Madison. It had no subject line.
It read,
"Rooted is everywhere these days. I walked into a store in Portland and saw your journals. They had a teenage girl behind the counter. She told me your story like it was a fairy tale. I didn't say anything. I just bought one and left." She attached a photo of the journal. It was the one with Tia's flower drawing. No request to come back. No attempt to rewrite the story. Just silence. And somehow that was enough. That evening, I lit a candle and sat in my kitchen, where it all began. I pulled out my grandmother's old tea tin and made the original lavender chamomile blend I used to sell in Ziploc bags. I took a sip and whispered, "Thank you." Not to Madison, not even to myself,
but to the journey.
To the messy, painful, beautiful path that led me home. Before I went to bed that night, I opened my closet and pulled out a dusty, bent recipe card. Grandma's handwriting still perfect in blue ink. "Remember, baby girl, some flowers bloom late, but when they do, they fill the whole room with fragrance." I pinned it back on my vision board, because this wasn't just my dream anymore. It was a garden growing beyond me. It was a warm spring morning in Portland, the kind where the sun spills like honey across the pavement and everything feels like it's humming softly. Hope, life, change. I stood outside our newest Rooted storefront, nestled on the corner of a tree-lined street, sipping coffee from a biodegradable cup with our logo stamped on it. The sign above the door read, "It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It belonged, quietly, powerfully in the neighborhood." I exhaled, the steam from my coffee rising like incense, and felt something I hadn't in a long time.
Peace.
Inside the store, sunlight poured in through giant windows, lighting up rows of hand-poured candles, tea blends, botanical skincare, and gratitude journals. Each shelf had a small nameplate beneath it. Curated by Lisa. Blended by Amanda. Designed by Tia. This wasn't just a shop. It was a museum of stories, of reclamation, of second chances. I walked through the aisles slowly. Amanda was explaining product flow to two interns. Lisa was reviewing a wholesale order on her tablet. Tia, now a college freshman, was sketching something new on the back of a shipping box. They didn't need me, and yet they wanted me there. That was the difference. We had just finished hosting a wellness and worth community event the day before. Dozens of women attended. There were art therapy sessions, yoga in the park, and open mic circles where women read their childhood journal entries, reclaiming their voices. I opened the event with a quote from my grandmother. "May your healing bloom loud enough to silence every whisper that said you weren't enough." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. And after the event, something unexpected happened. As I packed up chairs with Amanda, a woman in a cream blouse and oversized sunglasses walked quietly toward me. It was Madison. Her hair was shorter now, her posture less polished. There was a pause before she spoke. "I didn't come to make a scene," she said gently. "I just wanted to say, I watched from across the park, and I've never been more proud or more ashamed of myself in the same moment."
She paused again.
Your dream was always this. Not just products, but people, purpose. I didn't say anything. Not out of bitterness. But because, what do you say when the past walks back in, not asking for a seat, but simply offering respect? I hope you'll let me support from afar, she added. Even if I'm not welcome in your world anymore. I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. From afar is fine. She smiled, eyes glossy, and walked away. No hugs. No promises. Just distance. Peaceful, mutual, necessary. The success of Rooted inspired something new, a series of women's retreats. We hosted the first one in a converted farmhouse by the coast, an intimate gathering of 20 women who had been through it all: divorces, bankruptcies, family betrayals, health battles. The retreat included journaling workshops, herbal medicine classes, sunrise meditations, and storytelling nights by the fire. We didn't teach them how to be strong. We reminded them they already were. On the last night, everyone wrote a letter to their younger self and folded it into a paper flower. We released them into the ocean as the tide came in. Mine said, "Keep going, even when they laugh. Especially when they laugh." One afternoon in early June, Rooted was closed to the public. Inside, we hosted a surprise baby shower for Lisa. The shelves were filled with garlands of lavender and eucalyptus, the air warm with cinnamon buns baking in the back. Lisa stood in the center of the room, radiant, her belly round, her hands cradling a tiny sweater we had all embroidered. I watched from the back as Amanda read a blessing aloud and Tia passed around handmade cards filled with affirmations. In that moment, I realized something. This space, once built out of pain and rejection, had become a cradle for new beginnings. We weren't just healing. We were birthing futures. Near the front of the store was a section called the Legacy Wall. It was made of reclaimed wood and covered in framed letters, photos, recipes, and sketches contributed by women who had walked through our doors. One frame held my grandmother's original recipe card for the lavender chamomile blend. Another held a photo of me in my old apartment, mixing oils on the floor in pajamas. There was also a journal entry from Tia, dated just 3 months earlier. Rooted saved me from becoming invisible. This place reminded me I'm art, even in progress. On the day we celebrated our 1-year flagship anniversary, I came in early, before anyone else. I walked the floor barefoot, lit a candle, and played an old jazz record from the shelf.
And I danced. Alone.
Spinning softly between shelves of balm and tea and healing. I wasn't celebrating sales, or fame, or proving anyone wrong. I was celebrating returning to myself. The me who once whispered dreams into the silence of a studio apartment. The me who kept creating when no one was clapping. The me who chose softness instead of spite. On my birthday, I visited my grandmother's grave for the first time in years. I brought her a bouquet of dried lavender wrapped in Rooted packaging. I sat beside her and talked about everything and nothing. Before leaving, I unfolded a small paper I'd kept in my wallet for over a decade. It was the very first checklist I wrote for my business. Crinkled. Smudged.
Childlike.
Get jars. Make labels. Don't give up. I placed it on her headstone with the lavender. Then whispered, "We did it, Grandma." And for the first time in years, I didn't cry out of grief. I cried out of completion. Later that week, we hosted a community dinner. Long tables stretched under fairy lights in our backyard garden. Plates were filled with roasted vegetables, wild rice, and honey cake. Laughter floated through the air like music. I raised my glass toward the women around me. To the dreams they laughed at, I said. To the women who planted seeds in spite of the storm. Everyone clinked glasses. And in that moment it was clear. Revenge was never the end. Rooting, in love, in community, in truth, was the real story. As I closed the shop that night, I passed by the Legacy Wall once more. I touched the old recipe card, smiled, and thought, let them laugh. Because while they laughed, I bloomed.
And now?
They buy my dream in jars.